the biggest shift that's now occurred is that Gen Z and then Gen Alpha right behind them, these are the most diverse generations that have ever existed anywhere at any point in history. And talk about race, ethnicity, beliefs, gender and sexuality, identification. If you were to try and say Gen Z is XYZ and Gen Alpha is fill in the blank, you would be wrong more often than you're right.
Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Theology Around. My guest today is Dr. Josh Packard, who has a PhD from Vanderbilt University. He is a sociologist and co-founder of Future of Faith, which helps faith leaders expand and sustain relational ministries in today's rapidly evolving cultural landscape. Josh is the author of several books, including Church Refugees, Sociologists Reveal Why People Are Done with the Church but Not with Their Faith. And his most recent book is Faithful Futures. Got a copy right here for those on YouTube. Faithful Futures. Subtitle is Sacred Tools for Engaging Younger Generations, which is the topic of our conversation. I really value Josh's work. He is an absolute expert when it comes to understanding Gen Z and Gen Alpha from a sociological perspective. And if you are involved in youth ministry, if you're a pastor or a parent, I think you're going to find this episode incredibly helpful. Josh is not, I mean, he's not just a really sharp guy. He is just, he has done so much research on this. So he doesn't just rely on just anecdotal experiences, but brings a wealth of knowledge to helping older people like myself, like many of you, understand how we can relate to and reach Gen Z and Gen Alpha. So please welcome back to the show for the second time, the one and only Dr. Josh Packard. Josh Packard. It's been a while. It's been several years. I think last time you were on, it was pre-COVID. Yeah, I don't remember the exact year, but
yeah, but it's good to be back. It's good to see you. Now we're doing this over video. It's not just a recording, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I wanted to have you on because you are one of the, as far as I could tell, one of the leading experts on understanding the younger generations, especially Gen Z, Gen Alpha. You wrote a book a long time ago that I think that was a book I interviewed you about, Church Refugees, helping us understand church refugees, and which was an outstanding book. And I love that you bring in a sociological perspective and you're very clear. I'm not a theologian. I'm a Christian, but I'm primarily a sociologist. And you bring sociology to bear on understanding the next generation. How long have you been researching or interested in understanding Gen Z and I guess Gen Alpha more recently, because that's kind of a newer emerging generation.
Look, I've been doing this long enough that I started writing about millennials. Thank you for pointing out that distinction. I mean, when I went to graduate school to get my PhD in sociology, I remember having conversations with my faculty a lot about what does it mean to be a sociologist of religion and a religious sociologist. I mean, on the one hand, I am a Christian. I do care about the church and people's, I want to see people have an encounter with a God who knows them and loves them, et cetera. And also, you get trained in these research methods and a particular way of thinking. And what ultimately what I came to find out was that was just a perspective that was often missing in our discussions in the church, was what does it mean to think sociologically about what's happening beyond just sort of national statistics, which I don't think are actually all that useful most of the time. But what do we do with that? What do we do with that information? I mean, I say all the time, I want to do research that's useful, not interesting. And so that has, whether it's been with adults or emerging generations, that's been, 20 years now. I mean, it's 2 faculty stops, Springtide now at Future of Faith. And the beat just keeps going on. I mean, I think, and in good ways, I think we're seeing progress, not just because of me. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people who are now sort of trying to bring that perspective to bear, and it's been really gratifying.
That's awesome. Why don't we get started by you giving us a lay of the land? Last time I checked, my audience is pretty evenly split millennial, Gen X, and Boomer, which is I'm so excited about that because
no Gen Alpha listening to Theology in the Raw yet.
I don't think there is any Gen Alpha. It's a small percentage of even Gen Z. In fact, when I looked at the stats last year, I was shocked at how few Gen Z. I don't know what it was, maybe 2 or 3% of listeners, 4% are Gen Z, but a good it's almost third millennial, Gen X, Boomer. So it's a lot of Boomers that listen, and I'm absolutely love that because usually, and I'm 49, I'm a Gen X, and usually you kind of like hit your age group and lower. And the vibe of this podcast is a little, I don't know, younger oriented. I don't know. It is, but it's not. I mean, there's a lot of older people that are interested in having these kind of conversations. So help us, the overwhelming majority of our audience who are not Gen Z, Gen Alpha, help us understand what are the main things and maybe differences, misunderstandings that older people have about Gen Z, Gen Alpha.
That's a good question. So I think the biggest thing to understand is that these containers that we've been shoving generations into about every 10, 12 years or so. So just for some context here, Gen Alpha would, the way most, if you're counting them, if you're trying to, and you're going to understand why I'm caveating this in a second, but if you're trying to count Gen Alpha, they would be like 15 right now. And then Gen Z would go up to about 30. And then we'll start with the millennials.
Okay. I didn't know Gen Z was that old. Okay.
Huh. Gen Z's getting there, like 25, 26. Like they are, they're going to leave their homes of their parents any day now.
I was gonna say they're married with 3 kids, but touche. Yeah,
Preston, you've got decades old data. They're not going to get married until they're 33 statistically, and they're not having kids until they're like 35. These containers that we've been putting generations into, they were never like, we always knew this, right? It was like we understood that like baby boomers were not all the same kind of person,
right?
We knew that we were leaving out some of the nuances by referring to everybody born between two, fairly arbitrary years as fill in the blank or fill in the blank or fill in the blank. But they were homogenous enough that at least we were gaining some like intellectual purchase. Like we can understand them in some way. The biggest shift that's now occurred is that Gen Z and then Gen Alpha right behind them, these are the most diverse generations that have ever existed anywhere at any point in history at all across a broad spectrum of things.
What kind of diverse?
Race, ethnicity, beliefs, gender and sexuality, identification, religious leanings and behaviors. I mean, the whole gamut, right? But especially on the ways that we normally think about diversity in the United States, diversity is often shorthand for race and ethnicity and cultural background, and even immigration pattern. This is so if you were to try and say Gen Z is XYZ and Gen Alpha is fill in the blank, you would be wrong more often than you're right. And this is if we need to make a shift in anything, it's that shift, that we need to stop thinking about these containers as, being able to sum up an entire generation of people. They're just too diverse. You're sort of like going backwards more often than you're going forward. If you were to try and say, what did they say about millennials? Like millennials are so narcissistic. And if you were to try and make any kind of claim like that about Gen Z or Gen Alpha, you'd be wrong more often than you'd be right.
Interesting. So to even ask the question, how should we understand who Gen Z is? Even that question defies, simplicity for sure.
Well, it does defy simplicity, but I think we can look to other markers. Instead of trying to just describe them with a set of characteristics, I think we can look to the events that have colored their lives. And then, now we get into this so we should be asking questions about how they engage with, how do they engage with the digital world? We should be asking questions about how COVID impacted them. We should be asking questions about how they see themselves fitting into the landscape of the United States and the world, because their perspectives are so much broader. So I think rather than like trying to define them by a set of characteristics, it's maybe more useful to engage them around a series of questions.
Okay. So what are some of those defining events? Like help us, understand the world of Gen Z and those events and how that has shaped them on a broad level.
Well, COVID is obviously one of them. I mean, Gen Alpha doesn't really remember COVID if we're going down that young, but certainly Gen Z does. And there are all kinds of things the experience of COVID was not universal.
Right.
Even in some cities, like you had dramatically different understandings of what it was. And certainly by race and social class, you ask middle class, 2 parents in the household, good jobs that didn't go away during the pandemic. You ask my son, my 15-year-old, about COVID. He's like, oh yeah, that was the year that I did stay at home school with mom. Right? He's like, it's not a lingering impact on him, I don't think. And certainly not in particularly negative ways. Obviously that is not the case for maybe even the majority of people. So
Yeah.
that's a big thing. I think the other thing that is really critical, and I talk about this a lot, is to understand what we call growing up fast and growing up slow.
Hmm.
That in so many ways now, adolescence is marked by sort of delays in the traditional kinds of markers that maybe boomers would understand to be a part of being a teenager. So, in other words, like, did you get your first job? Like, can you make small contact or make eye contact and make small talk? Like, when do you move out of the house? When do you go to college? And as we already sort of alluded to, whether we're talking anecdotally about, like when you go to Starbucks, can the barista make change in their head? The answer to that is no. Or sociologically, it's delayed in all these ways. So like they move out later, they do less drugs, they have less sex, they graduate, they take longer to graduate, they get married at later, they change jobs, before they settle into one more often. I mean, all these traditions, good and bad markers, right? All of them take longer or start later. So in some ways, like growing up really slow. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. You can probably guess to some, but I would encourage people who are trying to fill in that gap. Like, don't think that your first answer is the only part of that answer. It's not just because parents are coddling their kids.
Okay, I was going to say that. Okay. Yeah.
There's a whole host of things going on. But they're also growing up really fast. So what they encounter and see online in the course of a day or a week is vastly beyond what I would have seen and encountered in a year when I was a teenager. I mean, like I'll use my 15-year-old again. Like he knows more about what's going on in Ukraine than I ever knew about the first Gulf War, which was the war that was going on when I was 15. And that is baffling to me about like, yeah, he knows more that's going on, but it's still through the lens of a 15-year-old, right?
Yeah.
And so for them to try and make sense of these adults where they often feel like they're not living, like they're coming up short for all these adults that are in these in-person interactions, but also that these adults who keep telling them that they're coming up short don't know nearly as much as these teenagers do about pronouns or about, what's going on in Gaza or, why the ICE raids are particularly impactful for them, even though they don't live in one of those cities. Like that is a weird cognitive dissonance to try and live with, where adults used to be, we used to always understand that adults knew the most. That is not the case now. Adults know more about some things, but they do not know the most in a given interaction with teenagers about a whole lot of stuff. So navigating that world, I think, is a fundamentally different kind of space than it ever has been.
And it kind of creates some distrust when our kids hear things from us that we're just passing on from our parents, and they within a couple seconds they find out that it's not true. Like caffeine stunts your growth, or Pluto's a planet, or there's just so many things that we just is like, well, no, my mom told us this when I was 13, and it's just true. It's just like it came from an authority, and my generation just believes it because it came from an authority. But now we figure out those authority figures didn't have the internet, they passed on stuff from there, And I found this like with our kids, like we have to be so careful to just say things without being really sure that it's true. Because if the more times they catch us in saying something just not true or is questionable, it kind of creates a little bit like, I can't really trust my parents, So yeah,
and I think that's especially true for like when you start telling people what they have to do, which parents are, that's your job as a parent in some ways, is to tell your kids what they have to do or as much as you can. But if you take something that was taken for granted, I'm sure, when we were kids, but like you have to go to college. I remember I came downstairs one time, one day during my senior year, and I told my mom at breakfast, and I was like, hey, I just dawned on me, like, I don't have to go to college. And she was like, well, what makes you think that? And that was the end of that conversation.
Oh my word.
But now, like, if you were to say something like that was just a taken for granted, like you got to go to college. Now you've got a generation of parents, and they, the kids are often seeing their parents talk about college debt, and you've got all these good paying jobs that don't necessarily require degrees. And, you tell your kid, like, you have to go to college. You're like, oh, well, what? Like, there's a good and healthy conversation to be had, but you're right. Like, just telling them that, like, it's a basic fact is like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I could also be an influencer, and you don't need a degree for that.
Oh my word. You must have been part of a conversation in my house yesterday. No, that's so true. And there is such I think a widespread conversation around like just how expensive so many colleges are. Not all, but a lot of them.
Oh, yeah.
It's like going to, 6-figure debt and then realize, and a lot of people were saying, I have a job that has nothing to do with my college degree, and that seems to be pretty high. It's always been a shockingly decently high percentage, but now it's like, so many people are in careers and jobs that they would have gotten whether or not they went to college or majored in this or that,
Yeah, quite possibly. Mm-hmm.
I love waking up to a good cup of coffee, and I also love starting my morning off on a healthy note. This is why I'm so stoked about Everyday Dose. Everyday Dose is like coffee with benefits. It combines real coffee, good coffee actually, with collagen protein, nootropics, powerful ingredients like lion's mane and chaga, and functional mushrooms, which supports gut and brain health, and it only takes like 60 seconds to make. Now, one of my daughters is a total coffee snob, so I wanted her to try Everyday Dose and to see if she approved. I was a little nervous, wanted to see how she liked it. She whipped up a cup, and honestly, she absolutely loved it. Everyday Dose tastes great for you coffee lovers out there, and it's good for you. It gives you sustained energy without the crash, and it improves your focus. Right now, you can get 61% off your first Coffee Plus starter kit, free peppermint mocha creamer, perfect for the holidays, and over $100 in free gifts. Plus, you can enter for a chance to win $100 cash or get your entire order refunded. Just visit everydaydose.com/TITR or use code TITR at checkout. My family and I love the Bible Recap. Tara Lee Cobble's books and podcasts are incredible resources to help you understand the Bible. And now Tara Lee and her team just produced the Bible Recap 365-day chronological study Bible. This beautifully designed study Bible features 365 scripture readings in chronological order, daily reflections on God's character and faithfulness, and insightful, easy to understand recaps. This year-long adventure through scripture will help you read, understand, and love the Bible, and most of all, the God who wrote it. The Bible Recap Bible is available in hardcover, softcover imitation leather brown, and hardcover imitation leather pink. It would make a perfect, meaningful gift for a mature saint or a brand new believer. Check it out by heading over to Amazon or bakerbookhouse.com to buy your copy today. Talk to us about the impact of social media. That's always, next to parents coddling the kids and the pandemic, like this is one that always comes up, and it seems pretty, it seems pretty clear this is having a profound effect on our kids. Is that verified? It's not just anecdotal.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and if you're looking for like, what's the prescription, is like, don't do it. Like, don't let your kids on social media. I don't think until it gets fixed or better, or we get better social norms around it, it is hard. It is hard to see much that's positive out of it. I will like leave a caveat to carve out for like, young people with marginalized identities in places that don't afford them in-person experiences that match the diversity of their expression. Like, social media can be really affirming in that way, as a way to find community around a particular interest or a particular identity or a particular set of questions. That can be really affirming, and a relatively safe place to to kind of figure some of that stuff out and not feel alone, because the loneliness is a problem, and so anything to help kids feel more connected can be useful. But yes, I mean, overwhelmingly the net effect of social media has been pretty negative, and I'm generally a technology agnostic. I mean, I don't think platforms are good or bad. It's how we use them. Okay. And right now, I would say like right now we're probably running up against both things. Like, we don't really know how to use this very well. I mean, a lot of parents who are now like millennials, like they grew, they got this when they were teenagers we all just thought it was the greatest thing. I mean, it was Arab Spring, and it was going to bring democracy, and it was going to let you connect with your auntie and get her cookie recipe, in an instant. And like, all that, in part because the social media companies themselves hadn't quite figured out how to leverage, the power that they had. And so there was this kind of like, I don't want to call it golden era, that feels way too optimistic, but there was this period of time when it felt like this was a thing for good. So we didn't really develop parenting norms about it. I mean, certainly millennial parents didn't know what to do about it. And parents only just now are starting to come around to this idea of like, well, what does safeguarding look like? And how do we put controls on this? And you can even buy the same technology companies that have like, are trying to ruin your kids in some ways, are also trying to sell you the solution. So I don't know, how confident to be in those. But it's ubiquitous. And so on the one hand, like, it is super scary. There are armies of PhDs at these companies who do not have your children's best interests in mind.
Yes.
I mean, full stop, period.
Yes. 100%.
They are not trying to make your kids flourish. And I would say that we could extrapolate from there to say, and I'm not so sure that they're all that concerned if your kids are actually being harmed in the process. And I think just recognizing that fact, and like a 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old's brain, just in terms of development, is really no match for, again, dozens, hundreds, scores of really sophisticated, scientists who are trying to do nothing other than keep their attention.
Yeah.
So it's an unfair fight. And as parents, we have to put guardrails around that, because the things that are attention grabbing are not the things that are good for them. I mean, rainbows and kitty cats don't hold your attention for that long. I'll say I've been heartened though, Preston, because I don't know if you've seen this in your own house, but like, I've been reading this a little bit anecdotally and then watching it with my son and his friends. And they seem to get it. Like they seem to understand that this is not great for them.
Yeah.
We don't let our son on social media, other than he can watch YouTube, but there's nothing. I told him, it's like, my greatest fear as a parent is the like button. I cannot have your self-worth externalized into a click. So you're not going to have accounts where you can post things. But even just like watching them sit around with their phones when they come over, and when they're at marching band practice and stuff like that in between times, and like they have these conversations, and so I've been seeing them like self-regulate as much as their, again, developmental brain, right? Dopamine is real. So you can see them trying to build in some guardrails here.
I've seen that a little bit too. It's almost like a little bit of Ludditism can be kind of cool.
Yeah.
And countercultural and punk rock in certain circles. It's not widespread, but I've seen it a little bit. Obviously, there has to be a maturity there for the kid to be able to recognize when a habit or practice is not bringing more joy, it's bringing less joy. And I think a lot of kids, a lot of people, not just kids, a lot of people aren't able to call that out in their own lives. But yeah, I have seen pockets of that though. This is where I think, not to get too off track, but I just think youth groups, parents, people in discipling relationship with Gen Z and Gen Alpha, we just need to be very proactive in helping them see what they already kind of probably intuitively sense, but be able to walk with them through that. Like, I just think if you're a youth leader, you're not talking through healthy social media practices. What are you doing? Like,
right.
Like, what are you doing?
it is like I said, we need guardrails. And I gave a presentation a few years ago, and I'll never forget this young person. She came up to me afterwards and she said, you keep using this like online life and I would say IRL, or in real life. And I thought I was being cool by using the lingo IRL, right? And she's like, only you all talk about that. And by you all, she meant adults. It's like, we don't do that. There is no online life and in real life. She's like, it's all just life, right? Like, that duality doesn't exist. She's like, when I go home from school, I get online, and some of the people I'm online with, I've never met face to face. Some of them are at school with me. I interact with people at school I don't interact with online. But that duality is. But then she said the thing she said was, but that stuff is like, but we have to have it, right? Like, I have to be online sometimes. And when adults dismiss my online life, they disqualify themselves from the conversation of my life.
Oh my gosh, that's huge. Can you say that again? For people in the back?
Yeah. She said, when adults dismiss my online life, they disqualify themselves from the conversation of my life. I was just like floored by this. Just like you, that was my reaction too. Because I think it is so easy as adults to dismiss, I don't know what's going on there. It's one more platform to get onto. I don't have any idea. But that all of that is true. I mean, it can feel overwhelming, and you're not going to understand. I mean, we read through my son has Discord, which is a chat. I mean, we monitor and read through it. I don't understand half of what they're saying. I mean, I would have to put it through Chat GPT even just to begin to decode it.
With all the like abbreviations and LOL
Oh
or
man,
whatever.
and the slang and all of it.
That's so funny.
So, but you have to be there. And so I remember I went home after that, and we used to drop our kid off at school, and occasionally I would say, hey, make sure that school's a better place because you're there today. Because as a Christian, like, we wanted him to understand that extends beyond that commitment that he made extends beyond just Sundays. And so then he's like wandering downstairs, and I said, hey, make sure Minecraft is a better place because you're on it today. And he stops and he's like, what does that mean? I was like, I don't really know, but it just feels like, I'm recognizing that this is more than just you logging in to play a video game, that there's a whole thing happening there. And I just am trying to remind you that we expect the same out of you. God expects you to show up there in the same way that you show up in the other places too.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I'm trying, right? Like we're trying to open up a conversation because what she said floored me.
Wow. Well, and the quote online world is so diverse. You think, what is the online world? It is Minecraft. Right. It is scrolling mindless reels on Instagram. It is scrolling porn. It is reading angry back and forth things on Twitter. It is meaningful connection. It is this. We've never met in person, Josh. This is sort of look at us. We're having a good time, right? It is, I've had through our the Patreon Theology Raw Patreon community with these monthly Zoom chats, and they're basically kind of like almost like a community group. We've had some of the most deep, meaningful. I'm talking people crying, praying over people. People sharing stuff that they said, I have not talked about this with anybody else. There was one time when there was like 15 people and one person, my mother has a trans kid, and she was, just sharing how, man, I'm just really trying to love my kid. And she seemed like she's doing everything right. The relationship still was a little fragile. And then another person says, well, I'm actually trans, is a young 20-something. And let me just affirm to you that, man, she even literally said, I wish you were my mother.
Oh.
Like and just, so do you know, I mean, that I've never met these people. They've never met. They may never see each other in real life. And yet that was one of the most probably radically transforming, encouraging, gospel-centered things, they could. I've never seen that in a real life Bible study. Sometimes the online community. No, I'm serious.
I know.
I have had much more richer, in-depth, meaningful, thoughtful, authentic conversations with some of these online spaces. So take that, Minecraft, porn, endless social media, blah, 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 predators on Instagram, the spectrum is this isn't the online world. These are like online worlds, right? I mean, which are vastly different. The only thing they have in common is they're two-dimensional, right? So,
but I do think that is, so Pope Leo actually, as we're recording this, just I think within the last week or something, was made a statement about the embodied and the disembodied world. And he was making the claim, and we do a lot of work with Catholic digital missionaries. And so like, this is very relevant to some of the stuff we're working on right now. But he was making the position that as a sacramental church, meaning like you have to be here in person together to partake in the sacraments, that is his concern about this disembodied online reaction or experience, rather, is that are there pathways back? Does it lead to something that's embodied and sacramental? And I love that he was not dismissing them. He was saying the things that you're saying, like that these can be very real. We should not ignore them or, disqualify them. And also we should recognize that there is something really important that happens when people get together, or two or more are gathered, etc. I think that's how the Bible says it, right? Etc. Both of these things are important.
Yeah. Etc. It's like when you quote like Matthew 16:10 FF dot in writing and following. I wish the more meaningful forms of the online world could help foster and lead to more meaningful embodied forms of community. But I'm not sure it always does. I think some people just feel a safety and a freedom to be more authentic, maybe in an online world. And I just, the more they have those meaningful spaces, is it pushing them toward more meaningful embodied relationships, or is it pushing them almost away from it and just wanting to gravitate to these online spaces? I don't know the answer to that, but
yeah, no,
I don't
and
know.
that actually, Preston, seems to me like the sort of like sociological, not just sociology of religion, but the sociological question of the day is, what does interacting this way mean? What is it? It's not so much, I don't think, like, what does it mean when you go a whole day and interact with a bunch of people and never leave your house? I think the real question is, what does it mean when you go a whole day, interact with a bunch of people without ever leaving your house, and you don't think it's weird? Right? Like, when it becomes that is like, what does that do to us as a society? What does that do to us as individuals? What does it do to us as children of God who are, find the presence of the divine and in community? Like, I think that is the question.
How much of this is just a normal major transition in history that we're in the eye of the storm after a few generations? It's just going to be, we're not going to be freaked out or concerned or think it's weird. It's just the new world we live in. Kind of like post printing press, the world will never be the same. That just radically reshaped society on every level. Or, the invention of the car, or the post-industrial age, now, one or two members of the household go off to work rather than, working on the family farm and being, these were radically, and if I'm wrong in any of this, let me know. You're this is a sociologist, but it seems like there has been major cataclysmic sociological changes throughout history. And I'm sure there was a generation or two that was just like, what is going on, and freaking out and everything. And then 100 years later, it's just like, yeah, I don't have any embodied. I never see my embodied friends. It's all online. It's just the way the world is, like I do all my shopping online. The grocery stores don't exist anymore. And, I don't know how to drive a car because I just hop in the self-driving car that picks me up. There's will there be just certain, like, we'll never go back to the world that used to be. And that's just the way it is. Like,
and I think that's probably true. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, look, like, the era of the thing that we think is so part of modern life, driving a car. I mean, in the grand scheme of history, it's going to be a blip on the radar, for example.
Yeah. I don't know how to ride a horse. Actually, I do, but theoretically.
Right. Exactly. It'll be a thing people do for novelty or something. So yes, I do think some of that is true. Like, my grandmother used to tell this story about growing up in northern Minnesota, and they were on the party line. The first phones were these, I don't know if your listeners, some of them might watchers, viewers might know what the party line was, but phones didn't just ring to your house, right? Like, an operator would have to patch you through, and anybody on that line could pick up, any of your neighbors, in other words, could pick up and listen in. And then we, of course, like, we developed new technology and new norms about what was appropriate, and it was fine. So some of those are just like cute little anecdotes, right? But you mentioned the printing press. We also get the Inquisition, and like and these two things are not unrelated. And so, on the one hand, I want to affirm, like, yeah, I do think that as a society, as people, we tend to figure these things out. But as Christians, we should remember that the people going through the transition also matter, and by appropriately adjusting what we can as quickly as we can, we can make sure that there's less harm created, that there's more good done, that more people are reached, and not feeling, like it would be folly, I think, to say, like, well, this will sort itself out. So if we go 10, 15, 20, 30 years where a bunch of people don't really know the presence of God, that's okay. And I don't think that's okay. Right. Like, so how do we figure it out? And I mean, the thing that's going to be, look, even if we talk about blips on the radar, social media is a blip on the radar. I mean, it's possibly that even the internet is a blip on the radar, because it's the age of AI is going to be the thing.
Yes. That as you're talking, I was just thinking, like, millennials grew up in the age of the internet, Gen Z, social media, but Gen Alpha is AI, right?
Oh, yeah.
This is going to be the thing that shapes them, where they can imagine a world without AI. And we don't know. I mean, that it's developing. I mean, just a little, I peeked into it. It's like the development is far outpacing the ethical reflection.
Oh my gosh. To the extent that they're, I mean, but you know who is leading on this, because it has been, it is like an ecclesiological issue as much as anything else. is the Catholic Church. So they've been thinking about artificial intelligence and convening, meetings about this for 40 years.
Oh, wow. Really?
30 years. Yeah. And they have now an office in the Vatican, and Protestant groups are starting to pick up now in the last 5 years or so. You're starting to see more summits and convenings. I mean, some of them are, I would say, like wildly dangerous, like hackathons, which are problematic in so many ways. But then there are other, I think, really responsible ones. Nevertheless, that's just in religion. I mean, the rest, 98% of the world using AI is not religion, and their ethical guidelines are scant.
Yeah. So we do a conference every year, Exiles in Babylon, and we're doing a whole session, 3-hour session on how Christians should respond to or think through artificial intelligence. And I've got like 3 PhD experts, Christian experts in the field. And I've watched some of their lectures already, and they're bringing up questions. And I'm like, I didn't even think to ask this question, like even one is an expert in the ethics of AI, but she said in a lecture she gave a while back, like the problem though is there's ethical reflection on AI, but hardly any Christian ethical reflection, that assumes we're created in God's image and so on. And it is as Christians, we need to not just trust the ethical leaders, but we need to also say, as a Christian, how should I think through artificial intelligence? She was just raising so many questions I didn't think existed. And anyway.
It was Preston, it was a really interesting, at Future Faith, we did this big study about the intersection of listening and faith formation. So I think it's the only study that exists that tries to document if being listened to actually impacts your faith development. And spoiler alert, it does. I mean, you can see all the results for free on our website. This is not me trying to sell anything. But at the very end of that survey, I just threw, a lot of it is about trust and like, does listening build trust, or, is it only building trust, or is it also deepening faith? And at the very end, I put in this question, is it agree to disagree, or agree or disagree, a 5-point scale. You've all seen these. And the question was, the statement was, I'm growing increasingly skeptical of the things I see online because I don't know what is artificial intelligence and what isn't.
Yes.
Yeah. And I was shocked at how high the response was, where it's like, oh, even the stuff that people are consuming from influencers, like the response, they're not seeing it. Like they're doubting everything. And it's the blog post that I wrote in the response is like, we're all doubting Thomas now. Like ministry has been pushed down from the institutional level for decades as people have been losing trust in titles, authorities, institutions, etc. Not just religious ones, all of them, by the way. And I had sort of thought like, oh, maybe this is leveling off, like this being pushed down to relational ministry as the response to living in this world of distrust. Maybe that was like coming to a close. And then we saw that question. I was like, oh no, like it's gonna go further. Like it's gonna get to the individual relationship, the block, my neighborhood. Because if I can't see it, touch it, taste it, smell it, like I don't know that it's a real thing.
Is that good? I mean, is that skepticism good or bad? I mean, part of it is really good because you don't want to just believe everything you see online. But
sure.
What's that skepticism going to lead to in a world that's already skeptical of any kind of like institution, authority?
Well, I think that's actually the question for you, right? You're the theologian. It's like sociologically, what this means for me is we have to understand that we used to live in a high trust world. We used to, coming out of World War II, America believed in its institutions more than basically any other country. And now we believe in them, not less, but the fall has been so much further than any other country has experienced that we don't really know what we're doing living in this low trust world. So we keep trying to use high trust tools, but now we're in a low trust environment. So in other words, like we keep trying to use sermons as a broadcast message. That's a high trust tool. We keep trying to get people to come to our parish, or our building, or our congregation. That's a high trust tool. We keep trying to lead with our titles. But in the low trust world, it's all about listening. Right. It's all about relationships. Like these are the most effective ways to build trust and deepen faith is through conversation, not by getting it, quote unquote, having access to the one true source of knowledge, and thinking that you have to disseminate it. And that is a radically different approach to ministry. Obviously, we employ these. So we have these ministry practitioners of Future Faith because we're not engaged. Megan and my co-founder and I are not engaged in active ministry. And Kedron Boston works at a church in Dallas doing youth family ministry. He says, years ago, we used to think that if we told the truth, meaning like if we led with scripture, that people would see that, the kids would trust us, and then they would spend, a bunch of time with us. And he's like, and that worked really well for a long time. And what we started to realize, recently, maybe 5 years ago, is that we had to flip that entire model on its head. And now we just try and show up and spend time with young people wherever we can, wherever they'll have us, inside or outside of the church, inside or outside of Sunday mornings, care about the things they care about.
Mhm.
And then they'll trust us, right? Because they'll know that we know them and what they're going through. And then we get a chance to live out the truth with them. And he's like, it's just a fundamental, it's taken the whole model and just completely reversed it. And it's such a beautiful way of describing. He calls it the time, trust, truth paradigm. And I was like, this is so great. We don't even need data. We could just have that.
On that, so in your book, Faithful Futures, which is outstanding, by the way, it's what I absolutely loving it. Can't put it down.
Thank you.
And I really mean, I mean, it's like, you're putting like sociological research that is kind of, and maybe hopefully this isn't why I love it, but it's like almost like confirming what I've intuitively felt through ministry for years. One of the things you bring out at the very beginning is the importance of what you call, not you, but what has been called sacred listening.
Oh, that's our term. That's
it is.
Yeah,
all right. You even have
credit for it.
You've got a quote from I love that you quoted David Augsburger, who's largely unknown, but I read his book. I think it's Dissident Discipleship or something. He wrote a book a while back that was outstanding. Anyway, he says, being listened to is so close to being loved that most people cannot tell the difference. I have found that to be so incredibly true. In fact, in whenever I talk about like, helping the church engage LGBTQ people and parents with gay or trans kids, I mean, my number one thing is you have to be a curious, intentional, authentic listener. Not listen, waiting. You even said something that I've literally said, like, don't listen, waiting to get your chance to talk.
Yeah.
Just listen as if you are just enamored with this person and their story, and you care deeply. You want nothing more than to understand them, their story, journey with them. Like you are, just really engaged. Can you expand on that? The importance, especially with younger people, it's distrust in authority. They're overwhelmed with all this information, don't know how to process it all. Talk to us within that context about the importance of sacred listening.
Well, thank you. So by sacred listening, what we mean is really like a sort of a systematic way of trying to do relational ministry that works across not just the 15 or so people you can hold in your head, but how do we really make scalable ministry out of this? And so we mean a particular thing, which we don't have to unpack all here, but because I think that's probably a little bit too far in the weeds. But again, all free, all on the website. We're not trying to lock any of this up. I think that maybe the best way to understand this is to go to the gospel according to Ted Lasso. And if you watch that show in the pandemic, like most of us did, in the first season, there's that really famous scene where he's playing darts against a guy. I can't remember, against the owner of the team. I can't remember what the former owner. I can't remember exactly what they were.
Wait. Rupert.
Yes, Rupert. There you go.
Yeah.
And I love that. I would encourage people to go and look it up. And he quotes this famous saying, and he says, people used to pick on me all the time, and I never understood why. But I realized at one point they were never very curious, and I always thought I want to be curious, not judgmental.
Wow.
And I can't remember if he's quoting Einstein or Whitman or whoever, but anyway, the sentiment is the right one: be curious, not judgmental. And the longer, like, that is so hard to do when you listen to teenagers. Why? Because teenagers say some insane things. Like, it does not take long. Like, if you listen to them, I was a professor. I mean, they would sit across the desk from me for advising, and like they would say things that were just bonkers. I mean, everything from what they thought they could do with their lives, or who they were dating, or just all of it. You've heard it, I'm sure. And if parents listening to this have heard it from their own kids. The challenge, I think, is to remember that when we listen to teenagers, it is not the same thing as condoning. And they know that. And I
Right.
think we often get in a hurry to want to judgment, to correct, which is a form of judgment, because we're so worried that if we don't say anything, they'll think that we're sort of giving the thumbs up or co-signing everything they say. And teenagers just tell us over and over again in all the research, like, that is just not true. Now, what they're doing in that moment, so okay, if they're not looking for affirmation, what are they doing? Well, they want to know a couple of things. First, they want to know that you understand where they're coming from, so that then later when you give advice, they can trust that you understood the situation. All right, because the advice part will come. Nobody wants unsolicited advice. Teenagers, adults, it's never a recipe for success, right? But the time will come that they'll ask, but that will not happen, or they'll invite, right? But that won't happen if they don't think that you understand their situation. So that's the first thing that they're doing. And the second thing that's happening is that they're figuring it out. Now, this is the wildest thing to me about the way adults treat teenagers, is that they understand that the music they listen to today is not the music they're going to listen to tomorrow. But like we will gladly engage with a 15, 16-year-old about what they want to be when they grow up, when they tell us things that they are not like they're second string quarterback, and they think they're going to play for the Cowboys or something. And we don't feel the need to like poo poo their dreams. We're like, okay, like we know that they're going to grow and evolve, right? We totally get that when they're dating at 14 years old, that is not who they're going to marry. Almost certainly it happens, but not likely.
Yeah.
But when they say things about faith, like for some reason, we suspend everything we know about teenagers, which is all about experimentation and change, and exploration. And instead we think like, oh my gosh, they just said something that was a little bit unorthodox, or that was off, or they're talking about tarot cards or something, and we better step in right now, or else this is going to be who they are forever. And
That's
the
interesting.
inconsistency of that approach with adults is so, and I get it. I get it at some level, because when you're talking about faith, that's the most important thing. If you end up being wrong about the job that you want to be, have when you grow up, or what music, that's less important. But remember that change and exploration is the dynamic of being a teenager. The question isn't, are they going to explore things? The only question is, are you going to be there, or is somebody else going to be there when they're doing it? And so that's that. I mean, I think that's why that listening is so paramount. I was really affirmed when you said that, Preston. You're like, this is what I've been saying for years.
Oh
I
my
actually don't
gosh.
think that Faithful Futures is a book for, that is necessarily going to be like life changing for people doing youth ministry. I think it's life changing for their bosses. Like
Yeah.
people have already said, like, I took your book and I gave it to my boss so I could keep doing what I know needs to be done instead of all the things that she keeps thinking that I should be doing every week.
So with youth group, and everything in your book, I mean, applies to anybody that's in a relationship with Gen Z, Gen Alpha, so parents, friends, family. But I am particularly interested in youth groups, and how understanding these differences between our generation and younger generations, how this should shape how we do ministry. So what is it, if listening is such a vital part of ministry, of relationships, especially with younger people, what does that look like in a youth group when you got a youth leader, 50 kids, a few leaders? Like, is there any like concrete changes that would need to be made to the way we do ministry when we, take seriously this need to listen?
This is a really great question, because I think it's you've honed in on exactly the thing. I mean, and there's two. One is an approach, and the other is a tactic, or one is like a theory, a strategy, and the other is a tactic. So the strategy here is, I think youth group used to be the point of entry, and now I would say you have to rethink of it as the destination. So real quick story: the campus ministry at the college in my town where I used to work, they said, we were sitting around talking about this one day when I was still a professor, and they said, we used to throw a big party at the beginning of the year. We'd invite everybody to come, and we get names and phone numbers, and that would sort of set our ministry for the whole year. We just follow up and follow up and follow up. And I was like, yeah, that was my experience in college. If there was, music and girls and pizza, like, I was showing up, right? Like, that is, you got me. I would go to, if there were 3 that week, I'd go to 3. And they said, like, what we began to realize is, like, this is a socially anxious generation. They've missed out, and now we've got like the COVID dynamic into this, where they've missed out on like how to have these experiences. They're worried about they're worried about strangers for all kinds of good and understandable reasons, like being canceled or being put on blast, or anything that they might make a misstep for. So the idea of coming to a big party with a bunch of strangers to hear somebody talk about God that they've never grown up with, that is not particularly appealing to them in the first week at this brand new place. And so they said, now we've flipped it. And instead we spend all year trying to get to know people, and we throw a big party at the end of the year. And that party feels less like a fraternity mixer, and it feels more like coming home, because everybody already knows multiple people by the time they get there, because we've been slowly building from, ones and twos to threes and fours. And so like, that's the strategy approach, right? Like, how do we think about youth group as playing that kind of a destination role, not your first point of entry? Especially for, again, we got a third of adults who are nuns, have left, have no religious affiliation. Kids didn't leave the church, their parents left the church. And so they often grew up without any kind of context. So youth group could be very intimidating. On the tactic side, this is really what we're trying to do with the sacred listening tools, and what we mean by sacred listening as a thing. And we say all the time, like, you can't do relational ministry with 500 people by having 500 cups of coffee a week. Like, it's just not possible.
Right.
But you can do it with 500 people if you know which 10 cups of coffee you need to have this week. But that requires that we do some different things in terms of like, we can't just be sitting down having conversations. We need to be having conversations that are directed to get us some key pieces of information that then, yes, we track. And like, we need to get as sophisticated about relational ministry as we've been about programmatic ministry. And we're not there yet. We don't have these tools yet, but we're offering some. Other people have offered some really great things too. But we need a mindset shift of like, oh, I need to find a way I can actually track that information so I can follow up, so I know who needs my attention. And I'll tell you just lastly on this point, Professor, we occasionally will survey in these Facebook groups or just when I'm at a conference or whatever, and we'll ask very informally, what tools do you use to keep track of all the kids that you work with? And the number one tool they use is their memory, like what they can store in their head, which is like, not great if you're over the age of 30. That's not a reliable tool. But then the second thing is the notes app on their iPhone, which is also not awesome. Like, they're just like jotting down little scribblings of like somebody whose grandmother died that really impacted them. And they're somehow supposed to remember to see that note in a year to follow up with that kid about what might be a very tough week for them. We got to do better.
How do we do better? Like, what would you recommend?
Well, I know this is like, I'm a researcher. So everything for me sort of starts as a spreadsheet, right? Like, I think we could do a lot worse than very simply having some directed conversations. Every kid's name goes down the first row, and then we just track those conversations over time. What came up in it, and then from there, setting reminders or connecting those kids to other adults in the community who can help them. Relational ministry doesn't just have to flow through one person. In the sacred listening tools, we have we have systems so you can like do a text to connect. Like, we have this really if you're safeguarding policy, if you have a way to text with kids, I think this could be really cool, where, you're just checking in with them over a series of weeks. They send back an emoji for their mood. You chart that emoji and color code it. And if you're like, oh, somebody's always red on Tuesdays, that tells you should reach out to them Monday night. Right. Or if they're like always red, period, like that kid probably needs more attention. And we do this relational mapping one where in the course of 30 minutes, you get, and on a note card, you get all the people who are important to that young person, whether they're interested in more conversations about faith, and if so, what kinds of questions they'd be interested in. Stuff that could take a whole year, but if you do it in the right way, you can do it in half an hour, and it gives you, what we say is like, imagine if you had a note card like this for every kid in your school or every kid in your ministry. And you could follow up on stuff like that. It doesn't have to be sophisticated. All the things that we talk about are like lo-fi, free to use, because I don't think we need one more technological solution. Yeah. We just have to start thinking a little bit about, okay, this cup of coffee is important in this moment. And also, what am I pulling out of it so that I can make sure that this person gets the attention they need from me down the road or from someone else?
Man, okay, so I have a few kind of different questions. Okay, first question. I'm not sure. Let me think about how to ask it. I'm asking. I'm wondering about the relationship between the gathering, the sermon, the youth event, the big group versus these kind of one-on-one, more intimate conversations. I think, and this is a generalization, that a couple decades ago, a youth leader would put a lot of energy into the gathering, they start preparing, he's teaching them. It's a lot of kind of top down. It's a lot of monologue. It's low relationship. And that's not negative. Like that was great. And there's a place for that. I think there still is even a place for that. I'm almost hearing you say now that, would you if you had a youth leader that says, Josh, help me to disciple my kids well, would you say what you're talking about here with this more intimate relational, that should be a more of a primary focus than maybe it was 20 years ago? So that's a lot. I was trying to figure out my question as I was going along.
I hear you. And I think it's a good one to ask, because sometimes I think we can get carried away, not we as researchers, but also practitioners of like, well, this national study says X, so I need to do X.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't know that you're going to get this a lot from people who do national studies, but you'll get it from me, which is to say, if you're reading something in our study or in somebody else's study that doesn't match up with the kids in your community, don't pay any attention to it. Like, the most important data are the data from the kids that you work with. And so I think generally, yes, like there are some good reasons to believe that if you had to start somewhere, you would start leaning towards relationships, not leaning towards programs. I mean, I think there's good reason to think that would be your most effective approach. But there is no substitute from, Fuller Youth Institute or, Future Faith or Pew or Gal. There's no substitute for what you know from the kids in your community. Now, I think that does require you then to do the work to check your own bias. Like, are you only interacting with kids in your community who you like or who look like you or who understand you? Are there whole pockets of kids that you're missing out on? So you got to go and listen to them too. So that would be the big caveat. But I think what you'll find more often than not is that it is going for this generation in this low trust world, and even for their parents, it's going to be relationships. It's going to be listening. The programs will still matter. When we asked in our faith formation and listening survey, a third of people said sermons were really important, but 2/3 said listening was really important in the moments that mattered most to their faith. So sermons are still important, but and are part of the equation. But I don't know that we've been like paying enough attention to the relational and the listening to go along with that.
I almost wonder with even the sermon, like it seems like it would be way more effective to build in more dialogue rather than pure monologue. So rather than give a 30-minute sermon in a youth group and then close in prayer, or even a lot of groups will break down into small groups, discuss it, and I think that can be helpful. But even like after you speak, giving them an opportunity to ask questions is that a form of listening? It depends on how you answer the question, I guess. But I mean, it doesn't replace the one-on-one private whatever, but I mean, just to show that this is not a top-down, trust me, but like, I want to hear what you think about this, and giving them space for that.
Absolutely. But you've worked in the like Christian colleges, and you've been around seminaries too. I mean, how much are people trained to talk versus trained to listen in these it's hard. I don't think that there's like, I don't want to give the impression that I think that there's like, clergy and youth ministers and pastors who are like out of touch and like not trying. I mean, I've never met a profession that tries more than people in ministry. But that's a hard shift to make.
Yeah. Okay. What about, so I could imagine a youth pastor listening and saying, well, I got 80 kids in my youth group, and it's hard enough just to get to, prepare. I do have to prepare the programs, whatever. And I do invest in kids. I do reach out. I show up to baseball games, whatever. Yeah. But I can't, 80 people or, 100 people, or 120 or even 40 people. Like, is it, and what is the role of like other lead, like say you have one paid youth pastor and then he has, volunteers. Yeah. It seems like those volunteers are really huge, because there's no way the really one youth pastor is able to reach out. Here's what I see, and this is kind of anecdotal, but like, to get anybody to volunteer can be a chore. You're asking for, parents, people with jobs, all kinds of things going on, to donate more time for free to care about kids that are not their own. Like, I would like to say that most Christians would jump at that opportunity. The reality is not many do. And every youth pastor is yelling amen right now, right? Like
Yep.
getting dedicated, committed people to volunteer is hard enough. Then try to get high quality people,
Yeah. People with maybe even some training.
or even know how to listen, like I've heard some, I don't want to say horror stories, but like just like volunteer leaders that I'm like, yeah, I don't want you around my kid. Like, it's like, you're not, I don't want you to disciple my kid. I don't want my kid to be like you. Like, I'm just not impressed with, but good for them. They're volunteering their time, whatever. But that seems like the key, an absolute key for ministry. And yet, how do you get 5, 10, 15 high quality, mature, curious, listening volunteers, I don't know.
I do think that that's really critical, because you're right. Like, we can't, as we've well established, like, you're not going to do solo relational ministry well with 80 or 100 kids. This is another, I don't want to sound like I'm beating the same drum, but I think this is why tracking those conversations is so important. So, for example, if my church comes to me and says, Josh, we're down our second youth person on Wednesday nights. Can you come, do you want to come and volunteer and hang out with the youth on Wednesdays? The implied part of that is from now until forever. my answer to that is like, not only no, like, I'm probably just not, interested in that right now at this stage of my life, but also I can't. Like, I travel a lot. Like, my Wednesdays are really sporadic. I would probably say no as much as I was saying yes. But if they come to me and say, hey, we've got a couple of kids graduating from high school this year. They don't really know what they want to major in. You used to be a college professor. Could you just sort of walk? They're all first gen. Could you walk them through sort of what their experience might be like and how they might pick a major? You've done this before. Preston, I would have coffee with them, or meetings with them, or Zoom calls with them for years, if that request came to me. If I would see to the end of their senior year and into their college year as an informal advisor, I'd be happy to. But that requires that you know something, right? So instead of like asking me to serve on your agenda indefinitely, it requires that you know something about me. It requires that you know something about those kids and that you can make the match. And when I say, like, in sociology, a lot of times when we're trying to understand somebody, like some group, some profession, we like to look for analogs. So what is this situation like, or what is this profession like? And we heard from, people in ministry a lot, like, well, I don't know how to manage that many relationships, sort of what you just said. And we thought, well, who does? Right. Who manages that many? And so we started coming up to fundraisers, right? We come to salespeople, and we think about community organizers. And a lot of times what those people are doing, obviously, is much more transactional. So we have to filter this through the lens of ministry. But what they all have in common is, like, they're handling hundreds, if not thousands, of relationships, but none of them are doing it without a system, and none of them are doing it without tools. Everybody, there is no community organizer doing a good job who's running around mobilizing their neighborhood around an issue because they just know everybody in their head. Like, they're all taking notes in some sort of, like, really codified way. Not so that they can remember, although it helps for that, but so they can connect other organizers to that person as well. Like, oh, look, Sally led the bake sale last year. She has these skills, but she's not really good with time management. So if you're going to work with her, like, it becomes your, I don't want to say, it's a weird thing to say, but it's like we need like a CRM for ministry. If you've been in sales, you know what that looks like. And we have to retain the heart, the goal of ministry. This is, we're not trying to sell people things. But to mobilize and activate a team of volunteers, it's going to require that we have some tools. And I think implied to your question also, Preston, is like, I've got to do all these other things. How do I do that? And this relational approach. And I don't want to be Pollyanna-ish about this. I don't think you can. I think most places with limited budgets, you were being very generous when you talked about a church with a full-time youth pastor and some volunteers. Like, most places are operating, as like, I think with half-time at best. Yeah. And I don't think I think it does sort of require that you make a choice.
I think if I would see this as such a absolutely crucial part of church ministry as a whole, and ministries allocate funds to what they value. And this is where I've been saying this for years. Church budgets are tight. I can't imagine trying to manage that. Some churches aren't. They have overflowing funds, Right. But for tight budgets, I still would say you still are going to put that money towards what you value. If if helping disciple the next generation in an unprecedented cultural moment with all of these challenges. First of all, there's no counter argument. This is vital. Lots of things are super important, lots of things, but this has got to be really high up there. So yeah, allocate more funds to help train your youth leader, maybe even pay volunteers a stipend or something to help ensure that you get people that are high quality and take it maybe more serious. I hate dangling money in front of people, but at the end of the day, I mean, I don't know. Like I don't know. Like if we raise an awareness so that if you're part of this church as a whole, you're very aware that we value our youth. We are a church who as a whole is wanting to come alongside youth, encouraging people to, consider getting involved in the youth group. I don't know. Maybe I'm biased. I got four Gen Z kids, and I've had like other, youth leaders who have just been unbelievable, amazing in my kids' lives, and it just played such a vital role. And my kids are awesome largely because of the influence of other people and others that haven't done that. Like I've had the opposite. So
right.
Yeah, I don't know. Before I let you go, man, I don't want to change the conversation too quickly, but I did want to ask you. You said something at the beginning of your book about I'm not going to be able to find it this quickly. Let's see. About how church attendance is down, involvement's down. Let me see. Let's see.
You picked up on the cheery part.
Attendance, belief, affiliation rates have all been declining for decades. We can't afford to continue doing things we've always done. I'm not sure if this is in the context of younger people in particular, but aren't we seeing, I keep hearing that there's a big revival happening among Gen Z, even Gen Alpha. They're more spiritually interested than ever. I don't know if they're attending church more often or even like, post Charlie Kirk, churches have been flooded with people. Are we experiencing a revival among younger people? Is the data showing that? And what does that look like? Yeah.
It's so funny. I just wrote about this on LinkedIn this morning. Like it's I think it is too, I think if we're being really honest about the data, it would be too early to say, yeah, this is a revival. Like, I'm not sure we're seeing it, but the data on those studies would be a lagging indicator anyway. I mean, how does revival start? Like, revival doesn't start because 3 million people wake up one morning and decide to go to church. That's not what that looks like. I think we are seeing these, like, at this point, anecdotal, but pretty consistent reports of people saying like, oh my gosh, my Youth for Christ chapter is flooded with people. We don't even know where they came from. Or like my Wednesday night Bible study, my 0 hour campus Bible study has, more kids showing up than I ever thought it would. And on and on. I hear this all the time. And we are starting to see some little pieces in the data. I think what I wrote this morning and what I said to 2 reporters in the last week about this was, it would be shocking if nothing were happening. I mean, we've known at Future Faith, we have been around people doing really innovative and unbelievable things in ministry. I mean, really mind-blowing things and inspirational. We try to highlight them in our newsletter. It's the whole reason we started it. Was because we wanted the rest of the world to get to see what we got to see. And I've been thinking like, well, it would be weird if that had no effect, right? Like, there's so many talented people. A lot of your listeners are doing things every day. They wake up and they just do incredible, like, boots on the ground, nose to the grindstone, day-to-day work of relational discipleship. And it would actually be a weirder story if that were all adding up to nothing. So I am not surprised by this. I think the context makes a lot of sense. I do get nervous that in the celebration of it, and we think about the theologies that are bringing people back, that we make sure that it's not also driving some people away. That there's this, like, especially as we think about the gender dynamic, like the celebration of young men, especially coming back to church. In some cases, it seems like I keep hearing these stories of them being drawn back to places with theologies that are just driving women right out the back door. And those data also are important and are very real too. So the revival, yes, but let's watch for where the leakages are. I mean, that sort of takes us back to church refugees in some way, but This is not, these things are not unrelated.
Yeah. And I am not concerned. I'm anticipating the longevity of it, the long obedience in the same direction, the good seed that fell upon good soil, that when the worries of the world sprang up, it didn't choke it out. So there is maybe a small part of me that would get excited to see much higher attendance among kids in a youth group or a church, and they're emotionally very excited about the faith at 17 years old. I think that's good, but that's a good, maybe a potentially good start. But I don't want to say, all right, we did it. Revival is happening. Right? Our youth group has tripled. I'm like, okay, so they're still on porn. They're still lonely. They're still anxious. They're still committing or wrestling with suicide ideation at 3 times the rate as before. They're still wrestling with their gender and sexuality like no other generation, and little guidance. They're still on and on and on and it goes. Mm-hmm. They're still not navigating social media well, and they might be killed by AI in the near future.
That's exactly the right point. Like, the size of your youth group wasn't an indication of the health of your ministry when it was small, and it certainly is not an indication of the health of your ministry when the kids are flooding it. Like, it's what you have to keep your goals in mind. What are you doing? What is the marker of success? And I would argue that while these things matter, like attendance or baptisms, that is not the whole equation of what it means to have an impact in a kid's life.
We could end there, Josh. That yes. So it's good. I don't want to be like, boo, there's tons of kids, but it's like, great. No, it's a great start. Now let's say, how can we do the hard long-term work of discipleship in this very, very unique and challenging cultural moment. Josh, thanks so much for being a guest on the show. I'll hold this up one more time. Faithful Futures, Sacred Tools for Engaging Younger Generations. This is not just an interesting memoir, like, here's my thoughts on stuff. I mean, this is from a guy with a PhD in sociology who has been studying this stuff for almost 2 decades. So thank you, Josh, for your work in this. And I love how you combined sociological thoroughness with a heart for the gospel. It's a great book, man. So thanks for being a guest again.
I appreciate it. You bet.